All right, welcome in a Big Hitters Only special podcast today. We have Julian Council in. We're going to go deep on UNC's head coaching search. It is Monday, December 2nd at 4:35. I think Julian and I have both had busy work days considering the nature of our jobs. Julian with the Panthers podcast and me with 24/7 Sports. It's a busy Monday. Black Monday, as they call it. All right, Julian. I wanted to have you on because I feel like you're like the best guy to talk to about like UNC's coaching search. I have a bunch of names. I want to kind of go through some of them and then get into kind of this search and how you think it's going. We've all been reading the updates on Inside Carolina. We're not going to give away like premium info, but it seems like this is going to happen at the end of the conference championship weekend, which makes sense because a lot of the candidates are playing next week and then have the hire ready like Monday or Tuesday of next week. Do you like that timeline? Is that kind of see what you're hearing and what you're reading?
I didn't love it when I saw that report on Sunday night because signing day is on Wednesday, and there is a quarterback prospect there at East Forsyth High School, Bryce Baker, that I really want to come to Chapel Hill. And he was at Penn State this past weekend, but then on Monday I saw Don Callahan put out a report on Inside Carolina that Bryce Baker was willing to move his decision back to Sunday and allow Carolina the opportunity to find a head coach and name a head coach, which tells me he wants to be a Tar Heel. Yeah. You just need to give him a reason to be a Tar Heel, and I appreciate that. Like, players, they don't have to sign on Wednesday. They can wait until until Friday, actually, with the signing period. And if they don't sign before them, they can't sign until they get on campus. So he can still be an early enrollee. He just won't officially have his signature until he gets to Chapel or whatever school he decides to pick if he does delay till Sunday. So I didn't love when I saw that on a Sunday night, but now that I'm seeing Bryce Baker is giving Carolina a chance, I feel a whole lot better about the prospect of potentially getting him here to Chapel Hill as a quarterback next year.
Yeah, and I was a little confused about that as well because I read there was a 3-day signing period, and it opens Wednesday, December 4th. They have 3 days, like the Friday, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But I didn't understand what you just said. Like, they could just walk onto campus, sign when they enroll, and that's how it works?
Yeah, that's how it would work. Because it's just, I mean, it's not fair. Like, if a kid, like in the situation he's in, he was going to Carolina. He's been to every home game, and he went to the Florida State game. The only home game he missed was this past Saturday at State, where he was up there taking a visit at Penn State. So he's been locked in, and just because his coach got fired, he shouldn't be forced to then make a decision and sign. Yeah, so that allows. And there's been talk about getting rid of the national letter of intent and all that, which, I mean, that's a conversation for another day. But he's willing to be patient. So that means Carolina have a coach signed, sealed, and delivered by Sunday, and then let that coach tell this quarterback, who's an in-state recruit and a top 100 according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, that we want you, we need you in Chapel Hill next fall.
Yeah, just delay your signing a little bit. That's good news. And other than that, the class is not really worth keeping. Of course, you need players. You need physical players, but it's 10 people with strength. 178th last time I checked. I can't access Inside Carolina right now. I don't know what's going on. I can access every other site. But, all right, so that's one date, December 4th, Wednesday. Another date is December 9th. That's when the transfer portal opens. So that comes next week. So the idea is that UNC has a coach in place by the 8th or 9th or 10th, and then you have a 3-week period. It closes on December 28th. And that's kind of the key because you're going to have to flip your roster anyway. You're losing tons to graduation. A bunch of stars graduation. You're going to have some people in the transfer portal. Eli Sutton's already entered. There's going to be tons more. And then you have 3 weeks. So that's really when the head coach comes in and can make a lot of changes, bringing players from his team and also scouring the transfer portal to get guys in. So that's the timeline. We think it's going to happen after. I'm sure conversations I've been having for 2 weeks now, or last week and then this week.
Oh, yeah.
So things are going on behind the scenes with agents discussing things, but probably won't become official until Sunday or Monday of next week. That's the time frame we're looking at. Okay, let's jump into some candidates.
And let me say this, too. Like, as far as the timeline, the most important date is that December 9th date. It's not Wednesday on the 4th, the signing day, because Carolina does not have a big class anyways. And portal recruiting was going to be a big part of what Mac Brown and his staff were going to have to do anyways, had they stuck around, as, again, they didn't sign a big recruiting class. And there's only a couple of players in this class that you look at, like I think Austin Alexander, the edge rusher from Kentucky, that you would like to sign. Alex Payne, who was their top recruit, who was an offensive tackle. He got flipped to USC. There were only maybe 2 or 3 guys that you really wanted. But at this point in time, like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you want Bryce Baker, but everyone else you can live without, as they need to be aggressive in the portal. Now, are they going to have the money to do that, or do they have the coach with the mindset to do that? That's something that we'll find out as this hire is hopefully made by Sunday afternoon.
And it's been made clear from all the conversations, Inside Cons, and great reporting on Bubba Cunningham, they want to get the hire right rather than rush it. That makes sense. There is some urgency, but finding the right guy, taking your time, being patient if you need to, is more important. This is a 4 or 5 year decision rather than next year. And with the transfer portal, that's how new coaches really can boost their rosters, through the transfer portal, and you develop through signing classes. All right, I'm going to give you some candidates. We'll go from the least likely and kind of the crazy to, and then at the end we'll close with who we think are the favorites, which I believe Jon Sumrall, Glenn Schulman, Jeff Monken, the kind of those names that are maybe a little more serious. So the Bill Belichick rumor, I was deep online on Sunday, because I think on Saturday night it got posted on Inside Carolina from the infamous Mac TTP that there is like legitimate interest, whether that's from Bill Belichick's agent or the powers that be at UNC, meaning like the board of trustees. They want to shake the tree on Bill Belichick. It's kind of wild. I don't know your take on it, but I think it's some people that really don't know football that are trying to guide this coaching search, that are trying to influence Bubba Cunningham's decisions. What did you think when you saw that name, and like the fact that it has been sourced that it is legitimate?
Yeah, I mean, people already question how serious Carolina is about being good at football. And this is more ammunition to that, like, concern. That's insane, dude. Like, Bill Belichick. I mean,
it is. But he's also like a great coach. That's the funny thing. It's insane, but it's like, well, and you think about it again, it's like, hey, he's a great coach.
Well, you just fired a 73-year-old coach, and you had negative recruiting against him because he was 73, and people wondered, would he be around moving forward? Now, I do think Bill Belichick would do a better job game day operationally and have his team prepared to play more than Mac Brown did. And that's not to be disrespectful to Mac Brown, who is a Hall of Famer in the college game. He's won a national championship. But, like, this isn't serious. And I think it's crazy that there are boosters out there, like key donors, who are saying, you know what? We like the candidates that you're putting out there, Bubba, but we need you to consider Bill Belichick first, because we got to make sure we're really getting the right football coach, even though this guy's never coached in college. And once Brady left, it wasn't like things are going great in New England. So there's a reason he was available, and no NFL team wanted him after he got fired in New England this past cycle. Like, why would Carolina want that? Like, how is that going to excite anybody except for the boomer boosters out there who, like, want to have a golfing buddy? And I don't even know if Bill Belichick even likes to golf.
Yeah. We won't give too much more time to this one, but it would, game day, like you said, preparation, film review, kind of the football aspects of stuff, X's and O's. That would maybe a little bit better than what UNC had. All right, let's move through some candidates. What do you think about Kliff Kingsbury?
I don't see him coming back to college.
Okay.
He's somebody who actually could get that Bears job based off of his relationship dating back to Southern Cal, 2 years ago, maybe actually this past year, back in, when Caleb Williams was there. So that might be something that helps him. He's doing really well with Jaden Daniels up in Washington. Yep. That would be fun offensively. I don't know. He's already shown kind of at the collegiate level, I mean, even the NFL level, but the collegiate level, if you don't have the resources, I don't know if he's that great of a coach, but offensively should be fireworks.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of getting that quarterback whisperer reputation with where he's been, so it makes sense, like the Bears or someone else with a rookie quarterback. I mean,
and he had Johnny Manziel at A&M too. I think I want to say I don't know if he was with Kyler back at A&M, or I know he was there with him in Arizona. But he's and in Caleb, he's played with a lot of like successful Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks, which makes a lot of sense. Why you would be like, okay, Kliff Kingsbury, I think is an NFL guy at this point in time.
And we spoke about how, like, the Board of Trustees wants Bubba to go out and kind of go for your white whales, talk to people, like, shoot higher than maybe the expected level. So I'm going to throw this name out here. What about Lincoln Riley? Now, first, he's a sitting head coach at USC. A lot would have to happen there. But hear me out here. What if he sees the writing on the wall at USC and he thinks, all right, I'm a little bit my seat's a little warm here. If I don't win next year, the seat's hot. Why don't I go ahead and leave now and start a new contract someplace else in a desirable job like UNC? That's where I could think, it's very, very, very unlikely, but that's the mindset I would take if you go after someone like that and convince him to leave a place where it's going to be hard to win in the Big Ten. He had a pretty bad season this year, and kind of to restart the clock at a place like UNC.
Yeah, I mean, restarting the clock is what coaches do all the time. Look at Scott Satterfield. We go back 5 years ago, everyone's saying, North Carolina, you're so dumb if you don't hire Scott Satterfield. Well, it turns out they weren't that dumb because he didn't do a lot at Louisville. He's got 2 losing seasons in Cincinnati, and he left Louisville to go to their rival right up the road to reset his counter. I think Lincoln Riley is obviously a much better coach than Scott Satterfield, but I do question how great of a program builder is he? He took over what Bob Stoops already had. He had elevated that offense in the final days of Bob Stoops' tenure there in Norman, and then he bailed on Oklahoma, which I just thought was insane. You're going to leave Norman. I get it for L.A., but you had to go start everything over and try to build that program, and they're sitting here at 6-6. And the same defensive issues we have in Chapel Hill, they've had there in L.A. Now, they were much better this past season. I think that could be a good hire for Carolina because of the name value and the fact he has been to multiple playoffs in that 4-team system. I just question him as just a program builder and as a recruiter because he's not really recruited that well either since he's gotten to USC. Like the biggest recruiting he did was like at OU with Caleb Williams and getting him to come to Los Angeles with him, but they haven't done a great job in the trenches. And obviously that matters as we're seeing they go 6-6 in what is more of a physical brand of football in the Big Ten than the Big 12 was when he was there at OU.
Yeah, and we talk about UNC's always struggled on defense. That's always been the rap against Lincoln Riley is he can't coach defense and doesn't coach defense. But quarterback-wise, what he did at Oklahoma and at USC with Heisman winners. And it's funny, looking at his record at USC, 11-3 first year, 8-5 second year, 6-6 third year. He has gotten worse and worse each season, especially he had Caleb Williams for 2 of those years.
I mean, that's basically what Mac Brown did. So he got to 11, which is what Carolina really should have gotten to back in 2022 of Drake when they were 9-1 and up 17-0 against Georgia Tech and then lose that game and then lose the state the next week. That should have been an 11-win football team. That's essentially what Lincoln Riley did with Caleb Williams that first year at USC. Then the next year, you said 8-5. What did Carolina go in 2023? 8-5. So basically, what he did at USC is the exact same thing Mac just did with Drake May in 22 and 23. Aside from he got those 2 extra wins, he did go to the conference championship game. Like it was basically the same tenure, literally. The last 3 years, man, 11 wins, go to the conference championship, get embarrassed defensively, lose that game, come back, have a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback, go 8-5, still have a bad defense, and then this year in a new league, ACC was different this year, go 6-6. It's just a younger Mac Brown who can't recruit that well.
Okay, I got it. We have a good rhythm here. What do you? I don't want much on this one. PJ Fleck.
No, not really interested. I think no one's really that excited because he couldn't.
That wouldn't be much exciting.
Yeah, couldn't beat Carolina the last 2 years, but he has been an overachiever. And if you look at Minnesota historically, he's won there, and most guys recently have not. So I do wonder in the Southeast how he could do. But doesn't really excite me.
What did you think about the report that one coach from every Power 4 conference has expressed interest in this job? Is that agents talking? Like, can you point to a name from each conference that would be, including the ACC, that would be interested in this job or that is showing major interest and mutual interest between UNC and them?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that's real. Pete Thamel came out immediately and said that this would be a coveted job. And he had pointed out in the Big 2 conferences, the Big 10 and SEC, that the power is coalesced at the top. Like, everyone knows what the top jobs are. Like, there's a very defined line. And if you are, I don't know, Brett Bielema, Illinois, you won 9 games this year. But do you think that you can ever win the Big 10 or get into the playoff day at Illinois? You might feel confident about that at this point in time. But if you're at like a Minnesota like PJ Fleck, that would make sense to me, a guy who would want to try and get a Southeastern job. In the SEC, I don't know. I mean, like, does Hugh Freeze want to bail from Auburn? I don't think that's a job he wants to leave. I don't think Mike Elko is trying to come to Chapel Hill. I don't know who it would be in the SEC. Clark Lee's a Vandy grad, so that would surprise me. Mark Stoops, I think he would more so want to retire, and he's going to basically take another Kentucky type of job, but I think a better Kentucky in North Carolina. So I don't know.
Shane Beamer's agent using it to get him an extension, and because he had a great season and kind of being like he's a hot name right now, and it would be I think it'd be kind of a lateral move or even a step down, but I could see that being the guy. And it's all agent stuff. Like, it's hard to take everything seriously when agents are trying to get their clients raises.
I mean, that's what it is. It's trying to get the raises. But yeah, Beamer, he's going to get an extension regardless, I think.
Great year from him. All right, two more kind of name. We already talked about Dan Mullen on a previous episode. His name's been mentioned. We want Dan Mullen. You don't want him. I think the fact that he hasn't been a head coach in a long time and doesn't enjoy or embrace recruiting kind of takes him out. And then Arthur Smith has already turned down the interest, realizing that he has a great job with the Steelers right now. He has them rolling. He's done a good job with that offense this year. And I think
the calendar doesn't line up because he would have to quit. And that's just – you're never going to get another NFL job. He could, but that's just going to that's going to kill his ability to get another NFL job if he ever tries to go back, if he just bailed on them in December and when they're 9-3 in first place in the AFC North.
Yeah, and Arthur Smith, obviously a UNC alum, a Sigma Chi frat brother, and his dad
Sigmachi.
His dad started and founded as a CEO, or was a CEO of FedEx. That's the interest there with his UNC connection. But yeah, I would just never leave the NFL and go to college unless it's a dream job. Just the headaches of college football with recruiting, NIL, dealing with parents, dealing with 16-year-olds, dealing with boosters, dealing with a crazy batshit board of trustees. It doesn't seem very attractive to me. Okay. All right, let's get into the more serious candidates. And if they're not serious, you tell me. I know you have a little stronger opinions than I do on this stuff. Jeff Monken, I've seen his name being thrown around a lot. I think UNC could do a lot worse than a Jeff Monken. He is he's in his 50s. He's 57. I cut and pasted like all the wiki bios here. He's been at Hawaii as a GA, Arizona State, Buffalo, head coach in high school, then went to Navy, was at Georgia Tech, head coach at Georgia Southern, head coach at Army. At Georgia Southern, in the Southern Conference, he was 38-16. And at Army, where he's been since 2014, he's had an overall record of 118-72. He had some mediocre years in there. He did win 10 games in 17, 11 games in 18, and currently has the Army Black Knights 10-1. I believe they play Navy in like 2 weeks. Look, I don't know much about him. You hear his name. He has a brother, right, that's a coach somewhere. What do you think about Jeff?
Todd is the OC at Baltimore with the Ravens.
For the Ravens. Yeah. He was at Georgia, right? Todd Monken was at Georgia. Yeah. All right, quickly on Jeff Monken, we'll move along.
Yeah, I mean, he was at Georgia Southern when I was in school at Elon, and they were excellent. And he helped them transition up, but then bailed to go to Army. And he's now won double-digit games 3 times at Army. And I haven't looked at their history. I'm guessing that's the first time someone's done that at Army since like the 40s. So pretty great accomplishment. Now, the whole triple option thing is going to scare people away. I've heard a lot of PR the last couple of years, like for Jeff Monken on his behalf, that he could be a coach at the Power 4 level, saying that he wouldn't bring that offense. And we've actually seen Ken Niumatalolo, who used to be at Navy for all those years. Yeah. He's at San Jose State now. Got them to a bowl this year. He runs a spread offense. So it's already been shown that a coach can go from a service academy to that, which is G5, though, out there in the Mountain West, and run a different offense and have success, even if it's only been 1 year. So I wouldn't necessarily be totally against it. I just do wonder, would he be the right fit as far as like what you need, handling NIL, which isn't to deal with that Army, and recruiting at a high level, all that kind of stuff. Just completely different job at the United States Military Academy compared to like coming to the ACC at Carolina.
This guy can clearly coach football. It's hard to recruit to Army. It's hard to get a level athlete at Army. And he has won there pretty consistently, peaked with an 11-2 season, 18. Again, I think UNC could do a lot worse, but I think this would be kind of a mediocre hire that wouldn't excite the fan base. All right, moving on. Barry Odom. Seen his name tossed around a little bit. He is 48 years old. He went to Missouri. He's coached at Missouri a bunch. throughout his tenure, GA, Director of Recruiting, Safeties Coach, Defensive Coordinator. He was the head coach at Missouri from 16 to 19, 4 seasons. He went 25-25 with a 13-19 record in the SEC. Got fired, bounced around. He was at Arkansas and then landed at UNLV. And he's done really well at UNLV, and that's why he's a hot name. He probably will get a head job this year. There's a couple of jobs that he can jump to, including like a West Virginia or a Purdue or even like a UCF. There's good jobs out there that are above UNLV. He went 9-5 last season and went 10-2 this season. Your thoughts? Like, what would you think if Barry Odom got hired at UNC?
This is one of those guys I wondered, kind of like Jon Sumrall, does he wait until next year? Now, the problem with Barry Odom, it's not really a problem, but it would be for Carolina as far as their timeline is. If they beat Boise State on Friday night, UNLV is going to the playoff as the highest-rated G5 champion. Like, they're going to be the 12 seed if that happens, and then I just don't know how you're able to hire somebody. And that's the great thing, like Sumrall, they lose on Thursday night. You shouldn't be that short-sighted and be upset by that, being like, oh, well, see, he can't win a big game. He's already in the conference championship. Everyone knows he's a good coach. But that now opened the door for him to actually be able to leave if they end up winning that championship game on Saturday. Whereas he could have been in the playoff, looking at how the situation was with the playoff rankings in the Big 12. But Barry Odom, like, if he wins Friday night, then I think it's a non-starter because I don't think Carolina can wait because the playoff games aren't until, like, December, like, 20th or something like that. It's, like, late in the month. I guess you could hire him, I guess, but I don't know. I think he's somebody who could wait for next year where Auburn could open up, Arkansas, where you mentioned he was at before, that could open up. We'll see how Missouri plays out with Drink. I don't think, he's not going to go back to Missouri, but he's from Oklahoma, so Oklahoma State could be a job maybe he looks at. Kentucky, if he wants to get back in the SEC. I think he's a good coach. I had to kind of get over his tenure at Mizzou and realize, all right, things weren't necessarily the best after Gary Pinkel left there, just with some like weird stuff. I'm trying to rebuild that program. He's done a great job in the portal, and that's what's really built UNLV to this spot. So that's actually very enticing for Carolina. He would be aggressive there. You just need to have the backing. I think he could actually be a good hire. When I first heard his name, didn't love it, but the more I've thought about it, in fact, he has UNLV on the cusp of going to the playoff. Yeah, maybe that's a guy Carolina should be really interested in.
I think it's a good point, though. Like, there are going to be a lot of SEC jobs, mediocre SEC jobs that come open next year. That are, he could wait for that could be just good, maybe better culture fits or what his background. You mentioned Arkansas. I mean, they're probably going to fire. What's his name there? The big hog.
Yeah, Sam
there.
Pittman. If he went 6-6 this year, but they could very easily fall off and go like 4-8 next year, and they're not going to likely keep him around.
Auburn could come open. Other schools. All right, moving on. All right, Jamey Chadwell. I feel like he's always been like a hot name for kind of a southeastern, North Carolina, South Carolina type jobs. He is 47. He's been a head coach at a lot of different places at the lower level. We'll focus just on Coastal Carolina and Liberty. He took the Coastal job after being the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator there for 2 seasons. He had Coastal at 35-14 and 16-5 in the Big. This is Charleston Southern. Because Charleston Southern 35-14, 16-5. Then Coastal Carolina, he got them 39-22 and 24-16 in the Sun Belt. He won big at Coastal Carolina. After a 5-7 season, he had them 11-1, 11-2, and then 9-3 before jumping to Liberty, where he's gone 21-4. This guy wins. He went 13-1 his first year at Liberty and 8-3 this past season. There's like some baggage with him, which I never get a straight answer on why. But what would you think about Jamey Chadwell? I mean, I'm not even sure this guy's going to be considered, but it's just a name floating around that I want to get at least a couple lines from you on.
Yeah, he had some NCAA violations at Charleston Southern. So that's the thing that Carolina may want to stay away from, just knowing, of course, how the university's recent history with the folks up there in Indianapolis. And he's also kind of been typecast in a way as kind of like that quirky kind of dude, like the whole mullet thing they had going on at Coastal, which I thought was awesome. Like, I had no problem with what they were doing there. I mean, they were winning games. So a lot of SEC programs, I guess, didn't really take him seriously. And I wonder if like the folks in Chapel Hill who want freaking Bill Belichick would take him seriously as a coach. I think UCF actually makes a lot of sense for him. He's also somebody who's getting paid a lot at Liberty. Like they have a ton of money, especially for a G5 program. So he could just write it out there. They're in a conference where in Conference USA, it's just terrible. A lot of the teams are like Charlotte and some other schools that were there before FAU have gone to the American. Like they can dominate that league and he can keep stacking up wins and go wherever he wants to go later on. But I would think UCF would make a lot more sense for him. But I think offensively that would be great. I don't know if the Carolina folks are necessarily that interested in him, though.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. All right. Ready for this one? Matt Campbell, Iowa State head coach, 45 years old, young guy. He's got a history of coaching in the MAC conference. He was the head coach at Toledo. I've been to a game in the Glass Bowl in Toledo. He went 9-4, 7-5, then 9-4, 9-2, 35-15 at Toledo in parts of 5 seasons, 24-8 in the MAC. Then jumped to Iowa. He's been at Iowa for a long time, since 2016. He's gone 63-50 overall and 45-36 in the Big 12. This is another. I think UNC can do a lot worse than Matt Campbell. I mean, he doesn't really excite, but I think the floor is really low. The floor is really high with him. Like, it seems like he's a program builder. He kind of can always get you between 7 and 10 wins in a Power 4 conference. I don't think it's a lot easier to recruit at a UNC than Iowa State. That's what I think about when I hear these programs. Like, it's so much easier to recruit at UNC than at Iowa State or UNLV or anywhere like that's cold, you know. So what do you think about Matt Campbell? I've seen his name mentioned. I heard his name even before they fired Mac Brown. So would he leave, and how do you see us kind of going with him?
Well, it's not just that Iowa State's like cold. It's like in Iowa, they don't have a ton of talent in that state. They have not won a conference championship at Iowa State since 1912, and they could potentially do that on Saturday afternoon in Arlington, Texas at Jerry World. Like, that's a major accomplishment that I think this is the second time he's gotten Iowa State to the conference championship game there in the Big 12. The fact that, like, that's a program that just has not had any success at all. He won at Toledo. I mean, Jason Candle's done a good job since taking over for him there at Toledo. And he keeps winning at Iowa State. And it's not just like he had the Brock Purdy years where they're competitive. Mm-hmm. He had guys like Breece Hall, some other pretty good players have gone to the NFL, which is a great thing to see that there's dudes that have been developed there. And now he's doing it again with Rocco Becht, who's kind of taking over that Brock Purdy role as a 4-year starter potentially there in Ames under Matt Campbell. The thing with him is he's not someone who's going to talk to Carolina. His agent might, but he's not going to have a conversation until the season's over. And much like Barry Odom, if they go to the playoff, well, Odom, I think, would be open to conversations because he would like to get out of that G5 job, I think, eventually. Campbell's not going to have a conversation with anybody until their season's over, and that's going to be around Christmas, and that's just a non-starter right there. If they lose, that would be great to be able to talk to him. The problem, though, might be, can you get it done quick enough by the time the portal opens? How would he handle the portal and all of that? But I think he's a terrific coach. And you're right. Like, Carolina could do a lot worse in getting someone like Matt Campbell, even if he has kind of a blasé personality.
So they win. Who do they play in the Big 12 championship?
They're going to play Arizona State. And
if they win, they go to the playoff?
Yeah, they'll be in the playoff.
Yeah, it would be 11-2 in the playoff. Okay, interesting, yeah. I wonder what his mind. I have no idea what his mindset would be. Like, is he happy at Iowa State? Does he think he can go someplace and win at a bigger level in the ACC or the Big Ten or the SEC?
He's been linked with some bigger jobs and he's not left. I think in large part because he's a man of integrity or whatever, and he's like, I'm not talking to y'all until the season's over. And programs just can't be that patient, and especially now with the playoff era. It's like really hard with the expanded playoff era to sit here and wait for a guy like that to talk to you if he's not going to be available to talk until the end of December. And the portal's basically closed, and any decent players that were in it are somewhere else, unless he's going to bring his entire roster, which I don't think we necessarily. I would take a lot of the Iowa State players. Obviously, they're better than the ones Carolina's had this past year and the last couple of years. He'd be a good hire. I don't know if that's going to sell tickets though, which does matter.
It's not super exciting, but yeah, it's a high floor for sure. Okay, moving on. All right, Matt Campbell. All right, I did a deep research on this guy.
Okay.
Ryan Silverfield. He's the head coach in Memphis. Dude, he has coached everywhere, and he was an assistant assistant at Hampton-Sydney, which is all boys school in the middle of nowhere in Virginia, as a freshman in college. He was an offensive assistant and became the D-line coach as like a sophomore, which is crazy.
What?
I was like going through it. I was trying to do the math on the years, and I was looking at when he started as a student at Hampton-Sydney, and then I lined it up to when he was a coach, and I went deeper on it. And he was a assistant football coach as a freshman at Hampton-Sydney. He is currently the head coach at Memphis. Memphis beat Tulane last Friday.
It was
Thursday
on Thanksgiving
Friday.
night.
Yeah, Thursday to advance to the AAC championship game. No, sorry, they won't advance.
They're not
Tulane's in the AAC championship game, but they beat Tulane. Let me list through where he's been. Hampton-Sydney. He's been Jacksonville. UCF as a GA. He went to the NFL with the Vikings for a while. He was at Toledo, Arizona State, Detroit Lions, Memphis, and then stayed at Memphis and took over when the current Florida State coach, when Norvell. You're so much better with names than I am. When Norvell went to Florida State, he took over, offensive guy at almost every stop, except when he was a defensive line coach at Hampton-Sydney. At Memphis, his only head coaching job. He's gone 41-21 in the overall and 23-17 in the AAC. It's not spectacular, but the last 2 seasons he's won 10 games both years, so it's trending up every year. 10-3 in 23 and 10-2 in 24. Big win over Tulane. I think Memphis, just from what I've heard, is kind of an easier place in that conference to recruit to. You can recruit a lot of different areas. The academics are pretty lenient, but he's done a good job there and probably is in line for a bigger job at some point. Ryan Silverfield, I don't think he's married either, which this guy just is a coach, Okay. It's just funny thing about a non-married coach getting the UNC job. It just, I don't know. I don't mind it. It's just funny as a non-married male. All right, what do you think about Ryan Silverfield?
Yeah, last 2 years been great at Memphis, and they do have a massive advantage over every program in the AAC because of the FedEx NIL dollars that Carolina was angling for when they wanted to kick the tires there on Arthur Smith. He said, "Thank you, but I'm good. I'm going to stick here to the NFL." I'm curious to see how this plays out because they're going to lose their quarterback Seth Hennigan. He's a senior. If like Sumrall comes to Carolina or he goes somewhere else, I mean, this will be the only job I can think of right now that he would actually be interested in. Currently open in this cycle, like Memphis should be able to win the AAC and potentially go to the playoff next year, provided that they are able to use that NIL money to get a quarterback and get everything that they need out of the portal, which they've been able to get some players that were like, they got a guy from Tennessee in the portal, a guy from South Carolina who are actually contributing at those schools in the SEC, which just tells you what kind of power they have there NIL-wise at Memphis. So it could make sense. I don't know. I'm not that excited by Silverfield, quite honestly, because he was in a little bit of hot water there post Norvell for those first 3 years until turning it around. I would think a job like UCF, if that's even a big enough job of an upgrade for him, would make sense. He is from Jacksonville, so I look at like a Florida job possibly next year. I don't know if Florida fans would want that. He wouldn't be at the top of my list. I think he's a solid coach. I like to see just a little bit more before really wanting to give him this kind of job.
Okay. These are the next 3 names are my top 3 names, in my opinion. I'll start off with Bob Chesney. Now, he's not proven it at James Madison yet. But he's been a coach at 4 different places. UNC fans are familiar with what he did against UNC, the 70-50 beatdown. I'll go through just his last 2 stops. Holy Cross, which plays in the Patriot League, which is not Division I, not the FBS Division I. 44-21 at Holy Cross. 28-4 in the Patriot League, and then at James Madison, he's only been 8-4 and 4-4. He had the big win against UNC, but had some losses after that. He's young. He's a good-looking dude. That's all I know about him. But I don't know. It just seems like he has coached at difficult places in small schools and kind of won everywhere he's been. When I hear about what a lot of people desire in a head coach at UNC and other places, you want to see someone have a track record of winning in multiple places and proving it in different scenarios. He's more of a Northeastern guy. He's in Virginia right now. What do you think about Bob Chesney? I think he would be like a backup, like third or fourth choice if push came to shove and you got turned down by a couple other people.
He kind of reminds me of Kalen DeBoer, who's at Alabama right now, because DeBoer won at South Dakota, and he's from the state of South Dakota. I mean, he won like an NIA school or whatever it was.
And then Fresno State, right?
He went to Fresno State, won there. I mean, Washington was a dumpster fire under Jimmy Lake, who's now the defensive coordinator there for the Atlanta Falcons for the couple seasons after Chris Peterson up and retired. And he turned that thing around immediately, won 11 games that first year. They won 14, 15 games last year before losing in a national title to Michigan before parlaying that job to Alabama. And we'll see if Bama makes a playoff or not at 9-3. But DeBoer won everywhere he has been. And he was not a Southern guy. And we'll see in due time whether that works out long-term in Tuscaloosa. I mean, if Jeff Hafley, who was a Boston College head coach last year, had he retired or not, if he had left earlier for the NFL, Bob Chesney would be Boston College's coach right now. I feel very confident saying that from a lot of the information that was put out there beginning of last season, even before Hafley was even thought of as someone who would leave. Like, he might get fired, they thought, and like Chesney would make sense. And Holy Cross almost beat that Boston College team back in 2023. I don't know. I do think he's a good coach. Again, it's just like you would like to see more at this level and his ability to recruit, because at least DeBoer was at Washington for a couple seasons recruiting, where Chesney has worked the portal beautifully at JMU, still didn't do enough to win their division in the Sun Belt. Now, had they gone out there and beaten Georgia Southern on Saturday, I believe they would be in the Sun Belt championship, and maybe they would have been able to win it. He would not be my top guy. I think he will be a Power 4 coach one day. I don't think it's time for him now, though.
Yeah. He's won everywhere he's been, man. You see 11 wins at Assumption twice, and then Holy Cross, 10 wins, 12 wins.
Don't sleep on Assumption College.
Yeah, sometimes you feel like you may be missing, like a guy like this, like you may be missing out on like a guy that becomes a stud in like 3-4 years, like you said, powerful coach. And then Kalen DeBoer, he coached Sioux Falls was the school that he was at before he went to Fresno State. I don't even know what conference they're in or what division they're in. Okay, moving on. The last two, we said these names at the top. They're the two names when you go onto message boards and you talk to people who are kind of in on this search. They're the two big names. And the first one has not been a head coach yet. 34-year-old Glenn Schumann. He's the Georgia defensive coordinator. He's only coached at Alabama and Georgia. He's a graduate of Alabama. He didn't play there. He went straight to working for the football team as a student assistant in recruiting roles and personnel roles before being a GA there under Saban for 4 seasons. Then followed Kirby Smart to Georgia, where he immediately got an inside linebackers coaching role, as a 20-year-old and then 20-something-year-old, and then became the Georgia DC in 2019, co-DC, and then the full-time DC in 22. He's been there as a DC for now 3 seasons. I listened to some of his press conferences. He seems like a football guy. He's young. He's unproven. I think the concern here is you want a proven head coach. We talked about doing it in multiple stops. This guy hasn't done it once. Imagine, I was talking to somebody in Chapel Hill on Saturday, like how overwhelming would it be to never have done this before, and you're jumping in to UNC, having to deal with NIL, transfer portal, recruiting, hiring your staff, hiring coordinators, hiring your support staff, hiring a recruiting team, dealing with boosters, dealing with the board of trustees. Having never done that at any level, it's got to be so overwhelming to do that. That's the concern of someone who's never been a coach. Now, he's learned under 2 of the best coaches in college football, in Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. So you could be, again, missing out on like a golden goose, a guy that could eventually become a really, really good coach. But there's a lot of questions and concerns. What's your initial thoughts on someone like this getting a job this big, this early?
Well, I mean, you got to start somewhere, right?
Yep.
And that's the thing. Like, Jimbo Fisher had never been a head coach until Bobby Bowden handed him the keys down there in Tallahassee. He only won a national championship. Kirby Smart had never been a head coach until he went back home to Georgia, and he's only built the best program in college football going right now. Dan Lanning had never been a head coach when he left Georgia to go to Oregon. Like,
that's the best example because Dan Lanning was the DC before Glenn Schulman at Georgia. That's a great example.
Hell, Kirby's a great example. Because
Yeah, but Kirby was older and he had done it for a long time at Bama.
Yeah,
right?
I personally, for me, I think Glenn Schumann should spend more time under Kirby Smart. He should do what Kirby did under Saban and really wait. Because Kirby, there's opportunities to take jobs, and he was going to take the South Carolina job. And then I guess his agent told George, like, hey, your guy is about to take the job down there in Columbia. So if you want him, you might as well go ahead and move off of Mark Richt and go ahead and do the thing. And they went out there and did it. And you got to wonder.
Kirby was going to take the South Carolina job?
Kirby was fixing to take the South Carolina job until his agent stepped in there and told Georgia, you want him, you better go ahead and get him. Now, I'm sure Kirby at some point, if he wanted to leave Columbia, he would have gone down to Athens. But I think Schumann could work. He's certainly got the bona fides. Working under Nick, working under Kirby. I'm not going to say he's a direct comparison to Lanning because Lanning's energy is crazy. Like that, he's my favorite coach in college football right now. If I could start a program today, the guy I'm hiring is Dan Lanning. He's not that kind of dude. He's a lot younger, and it's interesting. Like, he's going to have the right kind of support around him. The coordinator hires will matter a lot. You look at the offense that Georgia has. That's not an attractive offense. Mike Bubba is their OC. Like, you really do not want that offense coming to Chapel Hill. They might be great up front in the trenches, but look at the receiver play. All the drops they had in that game against Georgia Tech. If you watch them at all this year, and you look at some of the guys that put in the league recently, like who have they been putting in the league other than like Brock Bowers, who plays tight end? McConkey looks good too. But you look at recruiting, a lot of receivers don't want to play in that offense. So that would be something to really be concerned about. Like, you need to get the right kind of offensive coordinator hire, not do what Georgia's doing. And I get it. They won national championships in large part of the defense, but that offensive scheme is not an attractive one. So that's one thing I'd be concerned about, aside from like the age and the inexperience as a head coach at this level. But certainly, like, you can't complain if you're taking a defensive coordinator from the University of Georgia.
What do you think about I've heard this a couple of times and on board stuff about he's never coached anywhere but Bama and Georgia, those are probably the top two talents, amount of talent and level of recruit of anywhere in the nation. Probably Ohio State would be up there as well. But Georgia and Bama, they have the best players, and you're working with those level players. What do you think about that being a knock against him, that he may not be successful at a different school when you can't recruit 5 stars and 4 stars every position?
Well, you can recruit 5 stars and 4 stars in North Carolina. We just saw Mac Brown do it. We saw Butch Davis do it. Like, it's possible. Now, are you going to get the same amount of star talent like they're able to stockpile there in Tuscaloosa and Athens? No, but can you recruit at a top 15 level? Yes, we already saw it happen. Now, the portal and NIL has changed things, and we'll see what the whole rev share does for schools like Carolina. You're still going to need to have NIL as a sweetener on top of it. I don't think it's going to be just enough with the revenue sharing. It will help as far as competitive balance possibly. I don't understand it as a knock at all. How is it a knock that he's been at programs that know what it takes to win national championships? And if he's coming to Carolina, I think he's coming to Carolina with the belief and understanding that they're going to invest. Are they going to invest at the level Georgia and Alabama are? No, because they can't, because they don't have that kind of money sitting in the ACC. But can they invest far greater than they have in the past? Yeah, and Mac Brown sat here and said it on Saturday, saying he had $4 million of NIL. With rev sharing, the new head coach is going to have at least $12 million to work with, plus whatever NIL coffers Carolina is able to muster up with their new system of old well management. So I don't see how that's a knock at all. He's seen it from Saban. He's seen it from Kirby. He knows how you were supposed to aggressively utilize NIL. Like, that, to me, would be a positive, not a negative.
And it's also like he only knows elite ways to do things. He's only seen it being done at an elite level. So there's just a level that he brings that he's not going to deal with. Like,
meanwhile,
bullshit.
Bob Chesney has never been at a power conference school, and he's only been here in the FBS for a single season. So he's barely been around NIL. He's barely been around the portal and all the effects that it has. So why would he make sense? And I don't think people are saying he makes sense over Schumann, but that would be an example of pointing like, would you rather have that, or would you rather have a guy who's actually been at this level and has national championship rings?
Well, with the Chesney, the argument would be like he can take lesser talent and he's been able to develop it to a level where they're beating the competition.
Yeah. Carolina should be able to not have lesser talent. Like, they should really not be at a talent disadvantage against anybody they play in the ACC, aside from Clemson, Florida State, and Miami. And the gap shouldn't be that large. If you look at the 24/7 talent composite, they're like, what, 4th or 5th in the ACC? So they shouldn't be at a talent disadvantage anyways. Like, this program, if they get their act right, should be recruiting at a top 20, top 15 level with the right coach and the right establishment around that coach as far as just what they want to do in terms of supporting the program. Like, there's no reason they should be at a talent disadvantage against anybody in the ACC aside from the schools I mentioned, Florida State, Clemson, and Miami. And it shouldn't be that big of a gap.
Love it. All right, here's the big name. I think this is everyone's favorite. You see it, Bet Online, which I don't even know how legitimate that is. They have him as the favorite on their odds. They released in an email that I got a hold of, 3-1 odds. This guy becomes the next UNC head coach. Julian has been mentioning him since we had him on the podcast the first time, or after we kind of knew that a change needed to be made.
After JMU.
Yeah. Tulane head coach Jon Sumrall, extremely hot name right now. He's been a head coach at 2 places. At Troy, he went 12-2 his first season and went 11-2 his second season for a total record of 23-4 and 14-2 in the Sun Belt. And then got the Tulane job this past season. He went 9-3 and has been playing for a AAC championship. Before that, he is 42 years old, so he's young, 42. That's 4 years older than me. He played at Kentucky as a linebacker. He's a GA at Kentucky. He's been at San Diego. He was at Tulane before as a defensive coordinator and defensive assistant. He was in at Troy, then bounced to the SEC. So the high-level football at Ole Miss for 1 season, Kentucky for 3 seasons, and then got his first head job at Troy. 32-7 overall as a head coach. Only 3 years, but he has won at both stops. What do you like about Jon Sumrall, and why do you think he should be the top pick for UNC?
What I don't like about Jon Sumrall is the question. Like, I love everything. I mean, this guy is a fucking football coach, to be quite frank. Like, this is what you need in Chapel Hill, and we've had way too many years of dudes that did not have the disposition that this guy has as a football personality. He may not be the kind of smiling personality that the boosters would like, the kind of guy who's going to go out there, who's going to go play with you up at Linville or Grandfather Mountain or at Eagle Point. But this is the guy that you need if you're super serious about finally being good at football. He's an SEC coach. That's what he is. In North Carolina, he needs to start comporting themselves as an SEC program. We don't know what the future holds and whether they'll end up being there one day or in the Big Ten. But Clemson and Florida State and Miami, like, they want to strive for national championships. Carolina should be striving to be a playoff team, and this is the kind of hire that can put him in that position. He's defensive-minded, which I don't think it matters whether you have an offensive or defensive-minded coach, but I do think there's an appetite in Chapel Hill to have that. He is a guy who's tough, who wants physicality, and he's put together some doggone good offenses there at Troy and at Tulane. And what really excites me about potentially bringing him here to Chapel Hill is the fact that maybe Joe Craddock, who was actually under Dabo as an offensive assistant for a couple years and had Deshaun Watson, he is their OC, and he's a semifinalist for the Broyles Award that goes to the best assistant coach in college football. And he's done a great job with their freshman quarterback, Darian Mensah, this year. That's been a high-powered offense. They've beaten the tar out of a lot of teams this season down there in New Orleans. I love that. He potentially could come and help elevate that offense. And if he doesn't come with Sumrall, he's probably getting a job at an SEC or Big Ten school potentially this cycle. Like, that excites me. It's just he has the connections, even if he doesn't get them within the football world, that he can get a good staff around him. He understands what you have to do as far as NIL. He understands what a program is supposed to look like at a big-time level, even if he was only at Kentucky under Mark Stoops and then at Ole Miss, which hasn't historically been that great. But still, like, this is the kind of coach that Carolina needs to have. Like, I am desperate for Jon Sumrall to come to Chapel Hill, because if he comes, and I know SEC job is going to open up next year, and it would have just been a year where he had gone to one job for 2 years, gone to a job for another year, and bounced. I don't know if he bounces after 1 year. But you take that risk and you get this guy to come here because I don't think he's committing to Carolina if he's planning on going to an SEC job next year. If that's what he wants to do, it would make sense for him to stay his ass down there in Tulane. If he wants this job, he believes that North Carolina is going to commit the way they need to, and North Carolina can finally reach that potential that coaches have believed they've had for decades now.
Yeah, man, that's the social cut right there. Jon Sumrall, yeah, I mean, my thought is if he wants to spend another year at Tulane, they have the funds, seems like they have the NIL support there, prove it again one more year, and then wait for an SEC job. So that's the only thing is if he just turns down UNC because he thinks he can get a Kentucky job next year or the Auburn job next year. Auburn is a better job than UNC right now. And so that's my concern.
Been, always will be.
Yeah. So what does he want? Does he think that UNC is a great job and he can win there and that's where he wants to be? Or does he want to go to the SEC? He's never been in the ACC. So that's the concern. You got to think that Bubba's having talks with him and his agent right now. It seems like he's been mentioned from people in the know as one of the top candidates. So it's just kind of what he wants to do. I think he is the number one pick, the number one choice. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. Who do they play again this weekend?
They got Army. So that's a game they should absolutely win.
So that's the AAC championship game?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll say this. I'll say this too about Sumrall as far as what does he want, because he can control the coaching board this year and next year. He's going to be because I think Tulane, unless Memphis, I think it's probably them in Memphis next year. Maybe Army's good again. I don't know, but they're going to be right there, I believe, in the AAC title game a year from now, as long as if they can keep their quarterback. He's going to be someone that teams are going to try to poach out of the portal, whether he'll get at least enticed into the portal, whether he stays there at Tulane or not. But if he wants to wait for a job next year, it makes sense if he's trying to wait for Florida or if he's trying to wait for Auburn. But it does not make any sense to me if he's going to go wait for Kentucky. If you want the Kentucky job, you might just come to Carolina because you can at least win at Carolina in a new world. You're not winning at Kentucky anymore. That's done. Now that the SEC East is over with, now that Texas and Oklahoma are here, the way NIL is, they're just not going to be able to win. If he wants a job and it's not Carolina, then it would be Auburn, it would be Florida, and those aren't coming on next year. But maybe he sees it and has that arrogance that a coach is going to have coming here to be the one who finally gets it done and wins here for a while. And he could be the coach for a long time in Chapel Hill. If Auburn fires Hugh Freeze, that was 3 years. If Florida fires Billy Napier, that's 4 years. Sure, you get rich, but that may be your only opportunity to coach in the SEC. He can come here, have success, and the SEC will always be available down the road if he has success at Carolina. He doesn't have to go jump at that job immediately. He can get rich, have success in Chapel Hill, and leave in 5 years. And if that happens, then everyone should be thankful because that means that he actually won and we finally got a hire right here.
He played at Kentucky, right, and was coached there a couple of times too.
Right.
That might be the desire. I don't know if that's as much of a pull as it is for some people. It could not matter at all, but it could matter a lot. All right, yeah. So Jon Sumrall, that's the number one pick. What do you think happens? Now we kind of reset here. Appreciate y'all listening. This has been great. Appreciate Julian's time. Remember to rate, review, subscribe, follow, like. I don't think anyone's doing this type of content. No one is breaking down 15 head coach candidates like we are on the Big Hitters Only podcast. So tell your friends, share this with your friends, rate, review, subscribe, like, follow on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Great content here from Julian. What do you think happens? What do you think that ultimately take away the biases, take away where your heart is, use your mind? Who do you think is the head coach? When I'm going to Chapel Hill on Tuesday for the introductory press conference, who is going to be the guy there?
Well, the reality of how coaching searches go and how college football has been the last decade plus, whoever they hire is likely to be gone in 4 to 5 years. Let's all just understand that that's the likelihood of how this all ends up. Now, I hope that's not the case, as we've seen it kind of play out with Mac Brown. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I saw Sunday night Inside Carolina put out their update, and people they talk to are predicting it's going to be Jon Sumrall. If Carolina wants Jon Sumrall and he wants Carolina, he'll be the head coach here in Chapel Hill, and I'll be ecstatic. I don't know. I guess I would say that because I feel like those people have pretty good sources. I'll say it's him. I am still Like, I don't want to get my heart broken here. So I don't want to so I'm like thinking maybe he decides, nah, I'm going to wait and see what the, because that's what he really should do, is probably wait and see what the options are next year. But you never know. It's never, there's no promise that, because I've felt that way for a lot of coaches. Why not just wait? Like with Schumann, I said, why not just stay there at Georgia? But there's no guarantee that you end up getting an opportunity down the road. Like things could fall off there at Tulane. And it's like, oh, maybe Jon Sumrall is not that great of a coach anyways. People move on. I hope it's him. I can't really predict who it's going to be because it still feels so early and there's just not enough information out there to know who exactly truly is available. But if he wants a job and Carolina wants him, I think he'll be the head coach.
Yeah, he's odds-on favorite right now. I got to think if Schulman – is it Schulman or am I saying it wrong?
It's Schumann.
Schumann.
No L.
Schumann. I've never been the greatest guy at pronouncing stuff. I think if he gets offered the job, he would take it. Like, I think the fact that UNC is still the number one job open right now, after 3 more P4 jobs came open, UNC remains the number one job. I think you're going to get a pick of your top choices here. So, I mean, that's why we wanted Mac Brown gone, because it was going to be the top job in the cycle. So that puts UNC at a good spot. Yeah, I agree. I think all signs point to Jon Sumrall. He's got to. I don't know how these guys think and operate. I don't know if his wife wants another year in New Orleans because they moved around, in a different location 3 of the last 4 years. They've had to move to different houses and apartments 3 like there's some stability stuff. Maybe he wants to just kind of give another season to Tulane, or does he just?
I'm glad you say that though, Russ, because I don't remember where Troy is. Troy is in Alabama, but I think it's not in a town you necessarily want to live in. New Orleans. Now, it can be great if you live like in the Garden District, and they probably have. He's getting paid like $2 million there, so they probably have enough money to live somewhere nice in New Orleans. But if he does come to Chapel Hill, I mean, his wife's gonna love it here, and the wives control these things a lot in the coaching searches. And if Mama comes down here and sees Chapel Hill, they might be staying here for a while. She might not be that excited to go to Gainesville, which I hear is not the nicest place in the world.
Yeah, or Auburn, or yeah. I mean, Chapel Hill in December, a little different. It's like 25 degrees right now, a little bit different than Chapel Hill in the spring and Chapel Hill in the fall. But anyway, we digress. Okay, is there any other candidates you want to talk about? Anything else? One thing I want to ask you about: what do you think about Bubba doing so much media? I just saw he went on the Carolina Insider podcast too, and he's talking about his job. Like, I appreciate him being open. Yeah, I just saw it too. I have all these alerts and all. I saw that he went on the Carolina Insider, which is an in-house UNC-produced podcast. But he spoke to Adam Smith at the Maui. He's done some media on this job, which is great. I'm just surprised at how open he is. What do you think about that? What do you think about Mac Brown not taking questions after the game on Saturday and like calling him athletic director Cunningham and then mentioning John Pryor? The BOT involvement. How about John Pryor throwing Bubba under the bus a couple times? He's talking to WRL at every turn. It does seem like a little bit of a circus. The BOT is out of control. There's 2 or 3 people there that are kind of putting their. Go ahead.
It scares me. Because you have to have alignment when it comes to these hires, and Mac made it very clear that Chancellor Roberts had nothing to do with him being ousted. And my understanding was like a Zoom call because Bubba was Hawaii where he fired Mac. The way things played out, which is not ideal, obviously, but it's something that needed to happen. And maybe they could have waited until yesterday on Sunday to announce it. But then that's unfair to all these recruits who had the understanding that Mac Brown was going to be their coach. And then 3 days prior, he gets fired. Like, they would not have been able to go take visits. So it was the right thing to do for those kids to at least get to look at their options if they end up not wanting to come to Carolina based off of whoever's going to be the coach. Yeah, it's not good that the Board of Trustees, like John Pryor, is doing this, undercutting the AD. And this is not the first time they did it. They had the audit, I think, back in the summer of Bubba Cunningham, who's widely respected. And it would be a massive loss for Carolina if they push him out in a way that they pushed out Chancellor Gusowitz, who went up to Michigan State. Like, do not have these people who have been successful at this university and have guided it in the right direction and have them forced out because of whatever issue that you may have. And it's by my understanding as well that Bubba Cunningham and Mac Brown's relationship was deteriorating. And how could it be a positive one after what happened there after JMU, where apparently Bubba, Carolina, they've started looking at their coaches, as they should. If your aging coach pulls a stunt that Mac pulled. So I love that he's out there getting out in the media and letting people know, like, hey, we are trying to be serious here in Chapel Hill. It's time to do this with all the changes, because now you have Carolina NIL together with the Rams club and with Oldwell management to where they're in a position. I know there's that one report from whatever dude from WRAL that Carolina feels like, oh, they were behind on NIL. They got to be more serious about it. Okay, if that's true, be more serious about it, and that can attract a good candidate, but also let your AD do the job and then have the chancellor and the board of trustees on board with him and not fighting against him, because that makes this not an attractive job of people looking like, who's really in charge there in Chapel Hill?
Yeah.
Like, what situation am I stepping into? Like, that scares the hell out of me after I read all that stuff.
I think it's good that Lee Roberts is supporting Bubba.
Yes.
They seem aligned, and it seems like Lee, from what I've heard, I got this one source who's feeding me all this BOT stuff, that Lee Roberts he's not connected to the BOT. He answers to the BOG, the Board of Governors, and so he's like not in this BOT group. And there's John Pryor's undercutting Bubba, which in public, which is just like so nasty. And he was aligned with Mac, John Pryor was, and then just what he's been saying about how Bubba did it, spreading this PR move that how Bubba fired him from Hawaii. The firing was in the works, and the decision was in the works after the JMU game. So it's been a conversation between Bubba. This is all sourced. The conversation between Bubba and Mac consistently from the JMU game that this was a plan. Try to convince Bubba from Mac to step down, to handle it in the correct way. They couldn't align on the timing, and Bubba wanted it to happen. Mac didn't want. Mac kind of started winning, and then wanted to stay after agreeing to kind of step down. He wanted to come back and coach. It was kind of rallying support, and that's when we saw the media stuff and multiple press conferences and different reports that Mac wanted to come back, and then Bubba kind of called his bluff and said, I'm making the decisions here. And the whole movement was going on for multiple weeks, multiple months, and Bubba happened to be in Maui, so he had to make the call from there. But it wasn't like this was the first time they talked.
Right.
Like, they
and
talked
that's the thing.
many times.
And that's the thing, Ross, like, this is a decision that should have been made coming out of one of those bye weeks that they had. Even after they won those two games against Florida State and Virginia, like, it should have been made even after that or before that. Like, this should have already been announced. And Mac sitting here on Saturday night saying, yeah, it's the right time for me to leave. This isn't the game I used to know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, if that were the case, then you would have just been like, you know what, Bubba, you're right. It's senior day. They should have come out on Monday last week and him being like, hey, we're excited about NC State. I'm going to step down after this year. I think it's the best thing for the university. Like, if you really were on board with that, you would have been fine doing it on Monday. Why did it have to be after the game? Why couldn't it have been on Monday and you're saying, hey, I'm going to step down? The team already knows. You tell the team on Sunday after BC, I'm going to step down. That's okay. We're going to get things ready to go, and it's going to be a normal week. Let's go out there, beat State. Like, that could have been the right timing. Or earlier in the season when it was apparent to everybody he was not coming back. So I find that to be complete bullshit for Mac Brown, who I love, that he's like, oh, I agree, it's time to leave. When, okay, dude, were you really?
He's coming off bad. Like, he's not convincing anyone. Everyone kind of smells the bullshit. Like, I'm on the side of Bubba here, and like the fact he's calling him athletic or Cunningham and like not respecting the superiority of the jobs there, and just the ego that Mac has. We're kind of flip-flopping on the decisions. And look, if you're getting, like, he's your boss. Like, you have to respect him. You can't like shame him in public. And so it's messy. I wish it wasn't messy. Like, I agree. Like, I like what Mac's done for university. I think he's a good guy, but his ego got too much here late. And it's making him look bad. That press conference was just not some of the things he said, like the saving lives thing. Yeah. It's just kind of silly. Like, it's just cheesy.
Like, yeah, it doesn't come across great, but I don't care. It's over and done with.
Yeah, let's move on.
And like, and the Bubba thing too is like, look, whether you want to retire now, how you want it to be done, it doesn't matter. You're not the coach here anymore. So I'm the AD. I'm going to do it the way I need to do it, and it's in the best interest of the university that we let this be known. It's best interest of the people who are planning coming here next year, that they know what's going to happen. It's best interest of, like, for the program, we're moving on. And he made the right decision. I'm on his side as well as someone who's sick and fucking tired of driving 2 hours to go watch them give up 70 points against JMU and lose NC State and sit there on my couch and watch them get railroaded by Boston College. So he made the right decision.
Yeah. All right, well, that's in the past. We're on to the new head coach. Hopefully, next time we talk to Julian will be next week when this coaching search ends and the new head coach is announced. Julian, we appreciate your time. Definitely went longer than I told you we would. Thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate Garrett on the back end doing some of the graphics, and always appreciate producer Connor. We'll have some basketball episodes this week as well. Alabama, UNC on Wednesday. I'll be in the building for that one. Julian, appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, anytime, Ross.
All right, see you guys.